Could you please introduce yourself the way you would want fans to know you?
Well, Steve, I've been doing this for many, 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 many years, so I think that I would, a short answer is I'm probably the most experienced voice director in town. Not the only one, there are a number of us, but I've done more shows and have been in it longer than just about anybody in the business here. So that's about it. I would like to be known as the guy who probably voice directed more shows in the 80s and in the 90s than anybody else in town. That's the answer to your question, I think.
Oh, thank you very much. Could you please tell us how you got to be the voice coach of the Gem and the Hologram series?
Well, this is a small circle of people that work in the voiceover business. I was with Hanna-Barbera. Before that, I was with an advertising agency, a large one. That we did Kellogg's and Allstate and Marlboro, as a matter of fact, based in Chicago. They shipped me out to the West Coast. I started doing some commercials for Kellogg's using characters that were Hanna-Barbera's. Bill Hanna liked what I was doing, asked me if I would like to switch from the advertising business to work for Hanna-Barbera. And it took me about 3 seconds to say yes. In any case, when I got to Hanna-Barbera, I found it very difficult to sell to advertising agencies the kind of animation that was used in the shows. You remember Fred Flintstone would walk along with just his head, and the only thing that was moving on the screen was his mouth. You remember that?
No, that was kind of a long time ago, but I believe you.
It's called extremely simplified animation, and they didn't want that. So I found it very difficult to be the head of the commercial division at Hanna-Barbera, and I said, why don't we get me out of this, and I want to voice direct. You've seen me do it a lot on commercials. We will work together on it. He said, okay, and I started doing it. And so that's how I got into the business, let's say. So again, back to the fact that it's a small business. The people who work in one studio may have worked with you in another studio. They'll call and say, hey, are you available? We need somebody to do such and such. And so it's a matter of stepping around from one place to another, and it's generally a freelance job. At Hanna-Barbera, I was staff, but from then on, pretty much I was freelance. Marvel, various other companies. And the people at Marvel and the people at Sunbow heard me doing G.I. Joe, and I did Joe and Transformers, and then Jim came along, and they just continued working with me on it. The same people that were at Marvel wanted me, and I did Jim and the holograms. Does that answer your question there?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Mr. Burr. Number 3, G.I. Joe and Transformers were cartoons you also voice coached on, but both were different themes. War between good and evil. How was working with the Gem series, a cartoon about musical band competition, different in that aspect?
Let's see. Well, there isn't much difference between doing one show and another. The music that you heard in the Gem series was done in New York. I had nothing to do with that. The singers are not the same girls that played the parts of the actresses that you see on the screen as animated characters. So it was just a continuation of working with the same people. I'd done several shows already for Marvel and for Sunbow, and they asked me to do the Gem series. And the fact that it was a band, about an organization that Gem ran, had little to do with it. I was involved pretty much only with only with the voice characters that spoke and the ones you saw on the screen as characters. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Did you have a set overall voice plan you wanted for all characters?
No. Basically, when you're going to do a show, you figure out how the voice director and the person who's doing the casting has to kind of say, well, this person, by looking at storyboards and model sketches and so on, this is this kind of a person. You probably get some help from the writer, because they usually write a profile on these characters. He's an ornery son of a gun, or he's a handsome leader type, or whatever. So you start with that, and then you deal with actors' agents and bring in people to a studio and have them read short pieces of dialogue that represent the kind of character that you're trying to get. The kind of character, in other words, exactly, it isn't an exact science. I may have had one kind of characterization in mind, and a guy will come in and he'll read the copy the dialogue that I've had put on a piece of paper for him to read in an entirely different way, and I'll say to myself, hey, that's neat, I like that. That's better than what I was thinking about. All right, let's say I get through with doing 30 or 40 people. Joe and Transformers had huge numbers of actors in them, as you know. But when I got through auditioning, I sent my stuff to Marvel, and Marvel then sent it to Sunbow, and Sunbow then sent it to Hasbro. All of those people, I didn't make the final decision. I got people in to begin with who I thought were capable of doing it, but the final decision was made between the people at Sunbow in New York and the people at Hasbro, and they all kind of agreed, okay, here's the guy. And I would then see if he was available. Still, he might be working another show, it might not be, but it was my job to coordinate all that. And if he was available, we'd make a deal and check out how much money his agent was asking for, and then start scheduling the recordings. And consequently, during the actual sessions, I'd always have a cassette from the audition that was the basis for his being selected. And I'd remind him once in a while what the voice quality or the characterization was that got him the job. Sometimes they'll begin to fall off the character a little bit, forget it a little bit. You have to remind them. So I always had handy a cassette that, when cassettes were still standard, that would remind the actor of the kind of voice characterization, which I prefer to use that term, characterization, rather than his voice. We'll get into that in a few minutes on some of your later questions, I think, but it's acting. So the difference between the way an actor will do one scene and then the way he'll do another scene is probably based upon what's going on in the scene, in the story. And he may be angry in one, he may be happy and ebullient in another scene. Depends upon what's going on. So the characters, the voices they use, are mostly based upon an attitude. What's going on in the guy's head that you have on the screen. So it's not just a voice. I mean, I can do a voice like that, but there's no reason for that. I just did that by compressing my throat. But we don't do that in the show. We do it on the basis of what's going on in the story. So anger or happiness or whatever is a process of getting the character to be the kind of person or portray the kind of attitude that's necessary for the story. Hey, and you don't need to call me Mr. Burr. Okay? How about Wally?
Oh, okay. Thank you. My memory card is a